The Michael Bay Transformers films are a love it and hate relationship for many Transformers fans. The films are full of giant plot holes and also cheap gimmicks designed to get people to see the film in theaters. But at the same time, you also have to understand also the impact of these movies. For example, myself, if it wasn't for these films, I might not have been a Transformers fan today, at least as strongly as I am. Pretty bad to say the least.
Hey guys, this is Michael Bay. It's my last day in the UK. Wait, get the fuck out.
But also more importantly, it didn't make enough money, and the planned spin-off Bumblebee was retconned from being a prequel to a full-on reboot, which of course this wasn't the original plan. But the writer's room created to basically map out potential films, Transformers 6 and 7 planned for 2018 and 2019 respectively. Also an animated Transformers Cybertron prequel film was in the works, and also a Bumblebee prequel in the pipeline as well. But like Michael Bay and his franchise, it disappeared at least in its original form, or the upcoming Transformers A New Generation. Still though, what were the original plans for the Transformers cinematic universe, and why were they all scrapped? Well, in this video I want to cover the lost and cancelled Transformers cinematic universe in its original form. Let's get into it. After the release of Transformers Age of Extinction, which Bay originally didn't intend to direct but did, was a soft new start of the Bayverse with new characters, a smaller roster of Transformers, but still the same bland writing and direction sadly.
Affected by the Romeo and Juliet laws.
We dated for a little while. I was a sophomore and he was a senior. It's fine.
No, it's not fine.
We've got a pre-existing juvenile foundational relationship. Statute 2705-3.
What?
But Age of Extinction still made an insane amount of money, grossing an insane $1.1 billion at the box office, and despite this, the film still received pretty negative reviews, if not mixed as well, with me personally not being the biggest fan of the film. But obviously Paramount, seeing the success that this film generated, still wanted to continue Transformers, but how so? Seeing the insane success of the MCU with its branching films in one universe, and also the fact that the Transformers being so large as a franchise could arguably support this style of a large MCU-like franchise. So with the idea set in motion in 2015, Paramount created a writer's room led by Akiva Goldsman and also a couple other writers included as well. The room was basically designed to map out the future 10 years of the Transformers franchise, including main films and spin-offs. And after a few months of waiting, plans for the writer's room finally soon started coming out to the public. A Cybertron film called Transformers 1 that would act as a backstory to the Bay films and lead up to the first Transformers film in 2007. Also, other ideas that were announced for these Transformers films were also the idea that the Transformers were just everywhere in past. Now, why? I don't know, because reasons.
Genius.
So remember that in the last night they said that the Transformers had been around in the past the whole time, despite the first film saying otherwise? The writers in the writer's room came up with the potential films that expanded on this idea, and one of the more prominent ones was a proposed Transformers film called Transformers Operation Skyfire, which, I shit you not, is a plot where the Nazis in the 40s wake up Megatron from the ice, and the Autobot Skyfire was also going to be a pretty prominent character in the film, who, fun fact, was originally going to appear in The Last Night, and also going to have an Indiana Jones-like female protagonist to stop the Nazis and Megatron. Eventually, the proposed film would lead up to the conclusion that Megatron is being frozen by the Americans leading up to the first film. Like, I don't know, personally, this is a very bizarre concept for a Transformers film. Plus, by this point, Megatron would never been in Germany to begin with, since by the 30s he was already in the Hoover Dam, so once again, this is no way that this is actually possible. Now, as you can see with all the concept art, a lot of effort was made into this pitch for a Transformers film, but it seems like that this idea was thankfully not moved forward. I personally think it's a really bizarre sounding plot for a Transformers film, and I'm glad they didn't move forward with it. Also, other pitches for Transformers films were including another Bumblebee film, but this time around set in Victorian times?
What?
The plot being that Bee and of course another female protagonist would fight Onyx Prime, with Beast Wars characters also being introduced to the plot. This film personally does sound like it has a lot of potential, but at the same time seems like a bizarre fan fiction though at the end of the day. Another concept in the writer's room that was pitched was another concept for Bumblebee, which was pitched by the writer Christina Hodson, which was basically a period film about a girl and her car in the 80s. Sounds pretty similar? Yeah, well this would eventually be the pitch that would be used for the Transformers Bumblebee film that we would get in 2018. It was going to have the Quintessence and Galvatron as the main villain of the film on Earth, and also that Optimus Prime would still become Nemesis Prime, but this time around the film would have a cliffhanger of evil Optimus heading back to Earth, and that Bumblebee would be the leader of the Autobots, and in space, Optimus was still trying to find out who his creators were. Also, other storylines pitched for the fifth film also included the idea of the introduction of Unicron, and also that it would be much more focused on Cybertron's origins, and that Kate would also return in this film, but also this time around no World War II stuff will be included. Unicron would apparently try to use Earth to make his weapon or something, and also more no Autobots would appear in the film, and Kate Yeager would also return. And the rest of the plot is pretty scarce, as we don't know really what would have happened in Transformers 6, but apparently the film would have ended in time travel. Also, another idea for a potential film was called Transformers Knights, which was set in Arthurian times, which would feature the Guardians Knights on Earth helping King Arthur fight the Vikings. Apparently the main protagonist would have been League Maximo, which they intended to use the Primes as the main villains. I don't know, this idea sounds pretty weird, and I'm honestly glad it was scrapped. Other ideas for Transformers films included the idea that Transformers would be in Rome, or another idea was basically they would be in feudal Japan as concepts for potential films. All of these pitches and ideas for potential Transformers film, I want to disclaim, really should be taken with a huge grain of salt. I got all this information mainly from Reddit and also posts by TF5 2005 website. And while some of these ideas do sound credible, especially when you connect them to some of the confirmed concept art, at the same time, a lot of these ideas should absolutely be taken with a grain of salt, as they are not confirmed by Paramount or anyone involved with the writer's room. All of these wild concepts were indeed very ambitious, and Paramount really wanted to turn the Bayverse into a full cinematic universe juggernaut machine. And it seemed like that the whole universe might have actually had a chance to actually happening. Even by 2017, Michael Bay confirmed that there were 14 films planned for this future cinematic universe. But they couldn't cancel all the ideas, as Bumblebee the spin-off film was already well in production and was slated for summer 2018, but eventually was delayed to December of 2018. The film was initially planned to be a prequel to the Bay films, with ties to Sector 7 and also Megatron making a cameo appearance showing off his ice form that we saw in Transformers 1. But with the Bayverse crumbling around them, Travis Knight and Paramount retconned the film into a reboot for the franchise, and the studio shoved it aside. And luckily, eventually when the film actually came out, for the first time for a Transformers film in a long time, it actually received a pretty positive critical response, and also was a pretty big financial success as a whole. And of course, leading up to today, Transformers Rise of the Beast was announced, and basically is going to be a sequel to Bumblebee, and continuing the retconned continuity. And I know, as much nostalgia these films created for a lot of people, the consistent lackluster writing and also the sometimes annoying direction from Bay kept creating a bad image for the franchise as a whole. But at least all the ideas that were planned for the cinematic universe were not all laid to waste. I think personally we did get a pretty great Transformers film, Bumblebee. And also in 2024, Transformers New Generation, which is basically the Transformers 1 concept from the writer's room, but basically transformed, is an animated Cybertron film set to come out next year to explain the origins of the Transformers. And also the new film Transformers Rise of the Beast, which basically features Beast Wars characters, were also, if you think about it, ideas that also came from the writer's room, as mentioned before with the Victorian Bumblebee film. And even though some people may be sad that the Bayverse didn't really get a final conclusion, luckily there's a fan film called Transformers Rise of Unicron, which is basically going to set to continue the events of the last night and actually give closure to the Bayverse. Personally, I always support fan films, as I really appreciate the love that the fans put into these fan films, and you can always tell it's from a genuine place. And actually, some of the trailers for this film honestly look pretty well done and pretty cool, to be honest. So please everyone support this film, and honestly I can't wait to see it.